Okay, can you be really quiet while we sit here?
Yeah.
Okay, quiet for 1 minute. Ready? Okay. Hello, and welcome to Birth Through the Veil. I'm Melissa Kemrudin, and this week Erika is joining me. Erika is a medicine woman, a trauma specialist, a birth attendant, and an author. And she's here to share her stories of her 2 wild pregnancies. Wild pregnancies meaning she sought no care outside of herself, and free births, and in this case meaning she sought no birth attendants, just herself to support herself and the menagerie of guests that she invited. Erika's stories are lovely, as are all the stories. Enjoy. Okay, yes. Pop down. There you go, Matt.
Well, I am a mother of 2, a sibling among 6. I grew up in Prince Edward Island on the Atlantic coast, and then I decided I'd move to the Pacific coast. So I came out here to study naturopathic medicine in 2012. And actually, I landed first in 2004 for a national curling competition. And when I got off the plane, I looked around and said, wow, I'm going to live here one day. And then 2012 showed up, and I came out here for naturopathic medicine and stayed. So, yeah, I've been here for a little over a decade now. And my clinical focus at this point is trauma resolution. And I really go deep and intense with people, and the focus is to truly access the seeding moments of trauma, or the trauma imprints that cause drivers in our current experience of life. So causing triggers, causing undesirable behaviors, and I look for what I call a reoccurring pattern. So from an imprint trauma, people will recreate the scenario with different details, different location, but every time they recreate the scenario in an attempt to walk through it fully and resolve it completely, they often will mount a stress response, which causes a suppression of the emotions and an escape of the experience, which creates a new trauma, and it compounds the original trauma. And then every time they, quote, fail to move through it completely, the next time their being or their consciousness attempts to recreate it, it becomes a louder expression of that trauma. So louder, more dramatic, more intense, and it becomes a real puzzle of intensified, compounded traumas. And so I work with people to connect the dots between traumas throughout their life so that it can become less daunting to address some of their fundamental patterns, and help them truly untangle the, quote, mess or the intensity, so that they can actually bring themselves into living in the now without being driven by triggers from the past. So that's a little bit about me.
Oh, interesting. I knew none of this about you. And where does your motherhood journey start?
Goodness. It started probably at 5 years old when my mom asked me if I would stay home from kindergarten to help her take care of the twins that she was going to have. So, and then a baby brother beyond that. So I helped take care of the younger siblings, and felt responsibility for taking care of children since a very young age. And then I ran day camps for many years in my life, and simply just always assumed and expected that I was going to be and supposed to be a mother in my life. And then I started experiencing one miscarriage after another, and I was in school, so I was in a really intense stress state most of every day, and my body really wasn't in a position to experience a healthy pregnancy. And so finally it was the third definitive, probably fourth miscarriage, and I got to a point where I'd retrieved. They were all relatively early within the first few months, and so I retrieved the baby, and I decided to go through ceremony with it, and so I built a fire on the tide line or on the shoreline, and I put her in a box, and I burned her and all of my baby items that I had collected over time, and with that I wrote a letter to the aspiring mother in myself and let her know how much I love her and that I know she deserves to be a mother, and I'm also going to let her go. So letting go of the expectation and the need to be a mother in this lifetime. And I allowed myself to refocus on me instead of focusing on trying to get pregnant or trying to be a mother. I put all the love that I otherwise wanted to put into kids into myself, and help really focused on nourishing myself and my body, because I was burnt out. I'd probably burnt out for the third time in my life at this point, and rehabilitated myself to the point where I was vital and vibrant again, and let go of relatively unhealthy relationship. And within a couple of years of that full recalibration, I met an individual who was interested in living life, collaborating on projects together, and he was very self-focused as well in terms of really healing his past wounds. And so we grew in relationship together, and we grew in a way of being open to the possibility of kids, but not focused on that as an outcome whatsoever. So our priority was maintaining our own health and promoting our own health, and healing our trauma and our past wounds. And then within a year of being together and just loving each other and ourselves, we got pregnant. So, and it was surprising, but it was also, I don't know what the exact word is that I'm looking for, but I had reservations, and I had a good amount of difficulty connecting with the baby because of my anticipation that I was going to lose it anyway. And so, although I acknowledged it, and I spoke to him and I communicated with him, but I wouldn't let myself really connect with him, because there was underlying fear that he was going to die. And so the whole, the first trimester was pretty intense. We were in Vancouver at the time, and it was so much stimulation from sounds and smells and everything. But then made it through the first 3 months and moved to the island, and my nervous system started to settle down, and 4 months turned into 5 months, and 5 months turned into 6 months, and he was still there. And so I had passed the longest pregnancy that I had and that I had miscarried in. And so I really allowed myself to start getting excited, and allowed myself to start making plans for a little being in our life. And so the whole pregnancy really was a trauma resolution process, and allowing myself to accept that I am capable of creating a healthy human and that my body is strong and capable. And then towards month 8, I started focusing on maybe it was a little before that. Yeah, somewhere between the end of 6 and the beginning of the 8th month. I started conceptualizing the birth and really affirming for myself what I wanted and how I wanted it. And I'd been supporting births and birth keeping for many women by this point. And so I had a whole plethora of experiences, from incredible solo home births to really intense outcomes in the system. And being able to hold space for women in that, in those experiences, was really intense and really exciting and an incredible honor, but also really educational and informative in terms of what I wanted in and around and near me. And
did you have midwives, or did you get any?
No, I didn't, primarily because my experience with the midwives in BC was that so many moms had this expectation, or this assumption is a better word, had this assumption that the midwives have their fundamental desires at heart. And what I witnessed time and time again was that the bottom line for a registered midwife is liability and licensure and respect. I mean, they have protocols that they are adherent to. They choose into that whole system, and it's, I guess the best way to summarize it is they're required to follow through on specific protocols in specific scenarios. And this is information that a lot of moms are not privy to ahead of time. And so they end up, in my experience, several women were caught off guard when they were being ushered to the hospital for reasons that they didn't understand. And the more births that I attended and the more times I witnessed this happening, the more intensely I started speaking up, and the more we ended up keeping moms at home and with healthy, happy babies in the end, but relatively upset midwives. And so not upset at me for questioning them, basically.
I suppose it depends a lot on the ego involved of everybody, right? Because there are, like, midwives have to adhere to the standards that allow them to keep their registration. They have to feed their families. They come out of school with an insane amount of debt and really, like, have no choice but to maintain registration to service that debt for quite some time, no matter how they feel about it. And you can have midwives in those scenarios who would maybe make different choices than the regulations require them to follow for women, who would be really happy for a woman to make a different choice than what she's suggesting based on how she keeps her license, right? And then you could also have midwives who really believe in those regulations as the only way to have safe birth, and people whose ego is caught up in, I'm the savior of this birth and I make the decisions here. And when people don't, I mean, it's just like anything else, right? Just like any other profession or like anything else we get into, there's such a variety of things. But I think you're right. That's been my experience as well, is that women often don't know that. Like, you hire a midwife and you imagine like this like drumming granny, and it's not, for better, for worse, whatever. It's not really like that. It's definitely not like that when you're hiring a registered midwife.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, and that's why I say, respect bottom line, because I was in the same position having studied naturopathic medicine. At a certain point, I was like, I don't want to actually follow through with this licensure because I am not in agreement with the protocols that are being enforced at this point. They're no longer in alignment, actually, with what the fundamental philosophies of the medicine stated. And the profession at large has shifted in a huge way. And I don't agree with this anymore. And I'm not going to have my hands tied and required to follow through on protocols that I don't agree with. And that was a huge decision for me to make because I have huge mountains of debt that I have to service, like as you mentioned. So there are reasons to follow through with it, and at a certain point, it's a pros and cons game. But I couldn't live with myself was my bottom line, and if I wasn't being 100% authentic with the being in front of me. And so, so that was my experience. And I got to a point where I was like, I feel like it's going to be more stress than necessary to have a midwife present because I'm going to end up arguing with them and ultimately having to tell them to leave. And
not
so
what
I'm
you
not
want to do while you're entering the portal and experiencing that rite of passage. Yes.
Exactly. So what I chose to do was actually invite several friends, and my desire was to create an opportunity for women to witness the possibility of the female body and the possibilities of birth. And so for my first birth, I had 9 people showed up, in addition to my partner. Yeah, it was epic. So yeah, I anticipated that Shiloh would arrive around the 10th of October, but towards the second week of September, I was starting to have contractions that woke me up at night, which gave me some indication that, this might be happening sooner rather than later. And because we were also in the height of COVID and we were renting a space, and I was wanting to have such a large community of people present where we were living, the landowner said, actually, we're not comfortable with that many people. So we spoke to friends in Powell River, and eventually we ended up in Powell River for the birth. But coming up on the 19th of September, I woke up at 4:45 with water leaking, and I got my partner up and I said, I think we've got stuff happening today. So we got up and we started prepping packed a bit of stuff to head to Powell River. And but it was a Saturday and we had intended to go to a sweat lodge that day. And we were taking a couple women with us to the sweat lodge. So we walked the labyrinth. It was a beautiful, misty morning, and there was a labyrinth on the property. So we walked the labyrinth together, my partner and I. And when we finished walking the labyrinth, we went to there was other women staying on the property as well. We went to let them know that I was in early labor and that we were planning to go to Powell River sometime that day, but that we were going to attempt to go to the sweat as well. So they're like, okay. So we packed everybody up. We were ready by 9 and we headed to the sweat lodge. And I stayed outside, and there was a woman. At this point, I was at about 15-minute intervals, and I was getting up from the chair every time a contraction came. And after a few contractions, this woman sitting next to me, she's like, I think you're in labor. I was like, yeah, I am. She's like, what are you doing here? I said, well, it's just early labor. I've got time. I would rather be at the sweat lodge than anywhere else. So she's like, okay, but she started freaking out a little bit. So we stayed for a few hours, and then we caught the 3:00 ferry over to Powell River, and we actually had a drumming circle there that evening with a drumming family. Which caused the contractions to slow down somewhat, to a stop actually, and I had a couple hours of 0 contractions. And then everybody left and I went to lay down. And once the whole house was quiet, I started laboring again and contractions picked up and I was back to 15-minute intervals. And I labored most of that night, but it stayed in and around 15, 20-minute intervals. So then the next day, everybody got up and so people, and the friends that I had invited to stay were trickling into the evening as well, coming across from Vancouver Island. And so everybody woke up on the Sunday and I wasn't, like, I hadn't been progressing much. So I said, okay, we're going to the beach. I'm going to walk. I'm going to do some step ups. And so we went to the beach and everybody was lounging and relaxing. And I found this huge log to do step ups. And I did that for a couple hours. And my sister, I had told her on the 19th that I felt that things were happening. She was in Alberta. And she decided to fly over with her daughter, and they made it. So they flew into Comox and they came across on the ferry and they met us at the beach in Powell River. And soon after they arrived, we decided we would head home and get back settled in again. But on the way back, I was like, okay, I haven't eaten very much. I don't know how much longer this is going to go. I was resisting eating because I didn't want to puke it all up. But at this point, I was starving. So it's like, let's just get Indian food. Let's get hot curry. So I did. And I started eating it. And within half an hour or less, my water broke completely. And then one woman said, yeah, I heard that curry can actually augment labor. And I was like, oh, really? Well, that's good to know. I didn't know that, but it made sense. I mean, spices, and that would increase young energy and movement and flow in the body. Yeah. So it worked, and waters broke fully, and it intensified. It accelerated the intervals significantly. And at this point, we filled up the birth pool, and I labored out of the pool for probably another hour and then got in. And now we're into evening Sunday. And I was in the pool for at least 5 or 6 hours. And this was probably the most intense experience of my life. The transition phase from 7, I was checking intermittently, but from 7 to 10 centimeters was, definitely the scariest experience of my life. And I thought at a certain point, I was like, okay, I am gonna die, and I am okay with dying. I had also made the commitment to myself that I was in no way going to the hospital, to the point that I had a medic alert bracelet written, like engraved with, do not intervene, consent required, such that if someone present had decided that they should call 911, and if I was passed out and nonverbal, then I didn't want anybody to touch me. So, because for me, I've grown into the awareness that this lifetime offers us immense opportunity to move through every level of fear, but also every level of resistance and interference, and it's huge opportunity for growth. And we have full capacity to grow through every experience in our life. And what I have seen in the system is that opportunity gets usurped. And whether we're drugged through our pain, or we are or the problem is surgically removed,
it's like
and
a
various
bypassing, you're saying.
yeah, exactly. The various other forms of interfering or bypassing the opportunity, and which ends up resulting in just a recreation of the problem, which is actually the being trying to recreate an opportunity to work through it. But then fear mounts, and people want a quick fix, or they want an escape route. And yes, the system is trying to help, but what I have seen is that they're missing the point. And so for me, I decided I'm not interested in participating in that paradigm whatsoever, to the point that I'm willing to check out of this life, and I'll come back around in the next life if it gets to that point. So
what scared you so much? Do you know, like, about the 7 to 10? What do you think in there was?
It was the intensity of my body taking over, and I had never experienced that level of quote loss of mind control. Like, my mind could no longer control what my body was doing. And I had never surrendered to that point. And so that's what I really support women in during the birthing experience at this point, is recognizing that this is very much a body experience, and your mind has no capacity to regulate what's happening. And as much as your mind tries to interfere, I apologize, this would be better done in the morning. I'm quite tired, but
I feel you.
So when the mind tries to interject with the process, it actually just creates an interference for the body, and it stalls out the natural ability of the body to do what it needs to do. And yet, because we are such a cerebral society, we're in our heads all the time, it is really scary. And being an academic myself, like, I lived in my head for most of my life. And so it's really scary to let go of control. And it's ego, really. It's the ego that's like, what? Wait, no, I'm in control. No, give it back. I'm taking it back. So it really is the ego's fear of dying. It was
when you say, like,
more that.
When you say your mind, are you meaning like kind of like your frontal lobes, like your logical thinking mind? Like, is that what you're thinking of?
Yeah.
Yeah. And then when you say your body, you mean like your innate instincts and your,
Yeah. I mean, yeah, there's definitely still brain functions happening in order to support the body and what it's doing. Yes. Like the reptilian brain is still involved in the bodily functions to make this process work, for sure. But it's the higher level cerebral processes.
Right. It's like how we're talking right now. There's no place for this in birth.
Yeah.
Right. It's all instinct. It's all like knowing that transcends any knowing that we could have right now in this conversation.
Right. Yeah.
I get you. I hear what you're saying.
Yeah. So that's where the fear was coming from. And
the surrender. Yeah.
Yeah. But it was huge. It was huge surrender. And it was, my partner actually had been in the pool with me for a few hours, and he got to a point where he was getting cold and he was starting to fall asleep because he had been awake most of the night before as well. And he's like, I have to get out of the pool. I'm getting out of the pool. And he's like, you need to do this on your own. You're relying on me too much, which I was. And because every time a contraction would come, I would be trying to get away from it. I was like, my body was going into him. I was asking him, like, where are you? And just relying on him and trying to escape into him instead of staying in my body and being present with the contractions. So finally he got out, and he said he he could feel the intensity of all the women in the room, and nobody said anything, but after the birth, it was shared that they were pretty angry with him for getting out of the pool. And because I begged for him for probably another 15-20 minutes after that, for him to get in the pool, and he stayed beside the pool, but he didn't like leave entirely, but I was begging for him to get in. And then eventually the contractions started spreading apart again, and I was actually falling asleep between contractions. They were at like 3 minutes apart, and so he told me that they're starting to slow down, and I didn't realize it. So I said, okay, I'm going to get out of the pool then. And I said, why doesn't everybody go to sleep? It was like 3 o'clock or so in the morning at this point, maybe 2. And so everybody decided to go to bed. I went and laid down, tried to lay down on my side, and realized head was super low and I was not comfortable. And now contractions, because I had gotten out of the water, contractions started coming quickly again. So I went to the bathroom and sat on the toilet and had a small bowel movement, and then flushed the toilet and had a microsecond of fear and processing from a previous miscarriage, because the baby or the fetus had dropped into the toilet. So I had this moment of, oh my God, I just flushed my baby down the toilet. And then of course logical mind kicks in and is like, no, you didn't birth a baby yet. It's okay. And so, but it prompted me to check. And then I realized his head was right there, and that I could start pushing. So I could have been pushing. In hindsight, I could have been pushing long before, and I was resisting pushing probably for a couple hours while I was in the pool. So I got, but my sister was in the bathroom. I guess she had heard. She was in the bathroom. She was freaking out because she's not trained in any way. She goes and gets other people up and got my partner up. This is like 45 minutes after they had all gone to sleep. And I went into the bedroom and I got onto all fours, and everybody came into the room, and I started pushing. And I asked one friend to do hip compressions, because I have found that is like the most support in any birthing scenario is pressing the pelvis medially on the wings. And so I had one friend do that for 2 contractions, and then I asked her to step out because she wasn't strong enough, and I asked a different friend to step in. And within 5 contractions worth of pushing, after the next friend stepped in, he was crowning, and then head came out with one contraction, and then also to share, I learned a lot with this birth too, because I was so exhausted, and the contractions were easily 3 minutes apart and only 30 seconds long. So in a hospital scenario, that would be considered a quote unproductive contraction, and moms would be pushed to augment their contractions with Pitocin. And so just that the nature of that language, which suggests disempowerment and that your body's not capable, is that in itself creates trauma for women. And I felt really excited about having that experience for myself, and discovering that the capacity of the body ranges across a huge spectrum. And so his head was out, and then my partner and my sister were starting to ask, like, do you need help? And I'm like, no, it's okay. I just have to wait for the next contraction. And so I was educating people as well while birthing, which was exciting, and it was a bit of a dance. And then his body came out with the next contraction, and he he was a little bit, or not a little bit, he was a lot cone-headed because he had been in the canal for quite a while, and but he was responsive right away. He had quite a bit of fluid in his lungs, and so I did a little bit of, I let him work on it for a couple hours, and then I did a little bit of suction, just with my own mouth to help him out. But yeah, we let's see, I moved from the bed into the living room, and placenta was still intact, and cord pulsed for him almost 20 minutes.
Wow.
It was pulsing. Yeah. Amazing, and also highly informative, because that scenario is never allowed to happen in the hospital. And they consider it, I don't want to put a word on it, but gracious, I think. They consider it gracious to allow a 2-minute pulsing before clamping.
Delayed. That's considered delayed. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm just saying, like, gracious in the sense that it used to be immediate clipping, but still, to recognize the amount of time that blood was being pumped into his body and the amount of volume that he would have been withheld, that would have been withheld from him had that cord been cut so early. And then we waited for the placenta to come out. It was about 45 minutes before I decided to check, because I wasn't getting any more contractions, and so I just tugged on the cord a little bit, and it was actually, the placenta was just sitting on top of my cervix at that point, because when I put a little pressure on the cord, it just slipped right out. So but I was incredibly impressed with the fact that the cord pulsed for 20 minutes. And after the placenta was out, then we did a lotus birth, and we burnt the umbilical cord, and did a small ceremony, which included releasing Shiloh into his own agency. So accepting that he has come into this world to be his own being, and that we are choosing to share space with him, and he has chosen to share space with us, but we are in no way an authority over him. So we are choosing to support him and to help facilitate for him in whatever his needs are, but we check ourselves on a regular basis, because we were programmed in a way when we were kids that parents have the final say, and parents have the authority, and all these things, right? So so that the burning of the cord for us was a really solidifying moment, where we locked in all of our commitments to be with this little being in a completely different way than society suggests is the normal parenting model. So we were really excited about that process. And that was, I guess I didn't mention when he was born. He was born 5 minutes shy of 48 hours into my first awareness that I was moving into labor. So
how many weeks for you?
I felt like I was about 3 weeks shy of my anticipated date. So I was somewhere around 39 weeks. And I didn't do any prenatal care either, other than my own. And I just chose to stay out of the system entirely. So I didn't have a classified or designated date. But
but we always know. Well, we often know.
Right, yeah.
Yeah.
So I anticipated him on October 10th, and he came on September 21st.
Cool.
And so we stayed in Powell River for a couple days basically, after he was born, everyone made breakfast for us and cleaned up the pool and everything. And then we all conked out and slept for half the day, which was amazing. And another really exciting fact was that Shiloh latched immediately, but then wasn't interested in colostrum whatsoever. So he didn't nurse for almost 2 days. I tried him a few times. He wasn't interested. So within about 12 hours of not nursing, we had brought a bottle with us. So I gave him water, and he was happy to drink water, and he stayed hydrated until my milk came in. And as soon as my milk came in, I don't know if he smelled it, but he was ready to latch and
so
drank.
interesting.
Yeah, super exciting. And he's been a water drinker ever since, and Zephyra as well. And I encourage all moms to give their babies water, even as they're nursing regularly. Just giving them the experience of hydrating with water. And it also helps to support their liver and their kidneys, particularly because a lot of moms have a hard time with their diet in the first few months. Babies' intestines are so sensitive and particular to mom's diet, so it can be tough to get all the nutrients and hydration in that you are needing and that baby's needing. So I've seen great response with babies hydrating with water in addition to breast milk.
That's so interesting, because we're told no, right? Like the breast milk is enough, which it's enough. I'm sure like babies are fine with breast milk. But my grandma had she had 20 children, and really good Catholics in a small town in northern Ontario. Actually, not even northern, just like Ontario. It's cold, southern Ontario. And my mom told me she always gave the babies water, and she always said you should give the babies water. And I was like, she's so wise. She knows all the things. And I'm like, but I don't know. So I've never given the little babies water, but I'll think about that.
Think about it. Definitely. Yeah. I mean, we are the most percentage of our being is water. So it's just, to me, it's just reasonable. But what I've seen though is that baby's skin stays clear compared to moms who are only breastfeeding, and it doesn't take much in the breast milk to show up as too much sugar in baby's skin or too much yeast in baby's skin, and rashes and baby acne and all that stuff clear up really quickly if baby's supplemented with a little bit of water. So I mean, I also get moms to hydrate themselves as well and to get off all the stuff that's causing it, but still, I encourage water all the time, and try it. So that was, then we came home with him and had a glorious year. Glorious. Okay. There was definitely challenges, but I learned very quickly to pay very close attention to my diet, because on day 4, a couple of the women who had come to the birth decided to make a meal for us, and they made a raw kale salad. And I was starving, and I had 2 plates of raw kale. And Shiloh screamed all night long. And there are so many foods that can cause intense agitation in the intestines, and the brassica family is one of them, and the mustards are another, and the nightshades are another, and lentils are another, and basically most food groups. I stuck to fish and rice and oatmeal, peanut butter and sourdough after that for about 2.5 to 3 months. And I mean, I ate the odd thing here and there, but his intestines were pretty sensitive, and the most incredible solution anytime I ate something that he didn't agree with was fennel and peppermint tea. And
you gave it to him, or you had it?
Both. So I would drink it, and I would put just some on my finger and give him a few drops. And within 5 minutes, then I would express some of the milk off. And within 5 minutes of me drinking it, he would, because it would be in the middle of a breastfeeding moment, that I would realize, and I'd go make the tea, and then I'd withhold for a few minutes until I expressed some off, and until the tea had a chance to get to the milk. And within 5 to 7 minutes of drinking tea, then it would get to the milk, and he would be okay, and he would start farting. Like, he would drink the milk and he would start farting as well. So it was incredible solution. And if you don't have fennel and peppermint tea, then go for the oatmeal. Oatmeal is a savior every time. And but after that experience and being up all night with him and just witnessing the intense pain that he was going through, I started paying really close attention to my diet and what I was putting in my mouth. And then we maybe only had a couple of 2 to 3 nights of intense crying beyond that. And it's really, for me, it was really rewarding to be able to identify the root cause of his pain and to be able to solve it to a point where we experienced a really harmonious first year of life. And by, I think, month 4, towards the end of the 4th month, he was watching what we were eating and wanting to taste the flavors, and participating with us in mealtime, and then also dancing between meals with us and breast milk. So he'd want to sit on my lap, and he'd have a few bites of a meal, and then he'd have a little milk, have a few bites of meal, have a little milk. So so it was amazing. And then his first birthday rolled around, and still not attached to having kids in this life, got pregnant again. And it was interesting because I had a similar experience of disbelief and fear of attachment, because I was surprised that my body had managed to follow through with a live birth, and flabbergasted that it was going to do it a second time. I was like, no way, not possible. I wasn't going to have any kids. I went through the process of not having any kids in this life, and now I get 2. I doubt it. I don't think so. So I, again, and it wasn't like, I say it with a bit of comedy now, but it definitely wasn't, it didn't feel comedic in the moment. I definitely had to go through the intensity of fear related to the feeling like it was going to be a probability that I would miscarry this baby as well. And again, it was somewhere around the 6th or 7th month when I allowed myself to really start connecting with her. And then put out a similar invite for people to come and participate and be present. And this time we were on new land, and so we ended up staying at home. And I started laboring around 10 o'clock in the morning. I was out in the garden. We were getting the garden ready, and it was June of 2022. And we were working in the garden, and I started noticing intense contractions. And actually, I didn't have that many Braxton Hicks leading up to her birth the way I did with Shiloh. It was maybe only a couple nights of mild contraction, and then the 16th, no, the 15th, and the 15th rolled around, and the contractions started to intensify pretty soon after I noticed them starting. And I just continued about my day, but I started putting out word to people that I was going into labor if they wanted to come. And I spent a lot of that day with Shiloh and connecting with him and talking with him and explaining to him that he would have a sibling soon and what that would mean, but also sharing it as I knew it was going to be the last day for him and I to have just the two of us. And
how old is he?
He is going to be 4 in September.
And then how old was he at the birth?
Year, and he was 22 months older than her.
Yeah.
So, and then he spent quite a while in the tub with me. Okay, I'll back up a little bit. So yeah, we did lunch, and I was like, the contractions were getting pretty intense, and so he was noticing, because I would be down on the floor during a contraction, and so I was explaining to him that a baby was coming through the portal just like he did, and yeah, laboring pretty intensely, and Shiloh was witnessing it, and so I was explaining to him that there was going to be a baby coming through the portal, and then around 5 o'clock, it was 5 o'clock in the evening, it was intense enough that I asked Michael to light the fire, because we had an off-grid studio on the property, and that's where I wanted to birth, and we had a nice big soaker tub that we took in there, but we didn't have any way to heat the water up. So we heated water up on the fire outside the studio, and put it in to the tub a couple pots at a time. And I committed to staying in the studio by about 7 in the evening. And Shiloh and Michael were in there with me. And I had one friend came for an hour or so with her daughter. And then another friend came over from Vancouver. She was actually a birth keeper. And she arrived around 9. And then a third friend arrived around 10:30 at night, and she brought her baby, who I had supported her birth a year prior. So she brought her baby, and baby stayed with Michael inside, and Shiloh went inside because he was getting tired. So it was myself and 2 women in the studio, and I was in the tub for most of it, and they were alternating doing hip compressions for 3 hours. Yeah. From 10 till about 1. And by midnight, I was begging the baby to come, because the contractions were so intense at this point, and I was ready for them this time. I was ready for the intensity this time, and I had committed to a prompt for myself. So every time the contraction came on, I'd start snapping my fingers and say, relax, 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 relax. So I got myself, I guess the best way to say it, I was much more prepared for the intensity this time and ready for it. But that said, I still got to a place of fear, and uncertainty, and begging the baby to come, because I didn't know if it was going to stay at this level of intensity for many hours. Then I didn't know if I could handle it, because also the water, I had no signs of amniotic fluid at this point. And so I felt, because of that, it could still be many hours.
And more intense once.
Yes.
Yeah.
Once it breaks. Rupture. Yeah. Yeah. So that was an influencer of the fear as well. But then my body started around 1 o'clock, or a little after 1 in the morning. I got an ejection response, which I hadn't had, or I had resisted it with Shiloh. So I wasn't familiar with the sensation, but I knew what it was right away because it was starting to, like, my body was starting to push on its own. And I was like, oh, wow, okay, great. So I ended up hopping out of the tub because I couldn't find a comfortable position now that my body was starting to take over fully. So I got out of the tub and I sat on a yoga stool and tried to push in that position for one contraction. Definitely didn't like it. Got on hands and knees, which is the position I had done for Shiloh as well. And within 3 contractions worth of pushing, her head was out. And just before her head came out, my water burst, and it burst all over one of the women who was there. And she screamed, and I was like, oh my God, what? So she wasn't anticipating it. And so we had a bit of a dramatic moment for a second, but then her head came out and we realized it was just the amniotic fluid. Of course I felt it, but her scream kind of threw me off.
Yeah.
And and then, before that, I actually held her head back. It felt like she was coming so fast. I held her head back for one contraction because I didn't feel quite ready. And then the next one was when the water burst all over this woman, and then her head came out, and then her body swiftly followed. I didn't have to wait for 2 contractions. She came out quickly. So it was incredible. And she was covered in vernix, which was amazing. Like cottage cheesy, her whole body. And Shiloh hadn't had that much vernix, but she was completely caked in vernix. And so it was a really interesting sight. And she had a really cool symbol on just over her third eye as well, because of all the vernix and her frown lines and stuff. And so then one of the women went to get Michael and Shiloh, and they came out, and Michael hadn't anticipated a girl because there were so many boys in his line and in generations before him. And so he anticipated it was going to be a boy. And he came in and he said, so what is it? I said, it's a girl. He's like, no, it isn't. And I was like, yep, it is. So we were pretty excited to welcome Zephyra. And
how many weeks did you think she was? I can't remember if you said.
She was also around 39 weeks. I was anticipating her at the end of June, and she came on the 16th. So, yeah. But it was, honestly, I don't feel like there's appropriate or adequate words in the English language, or maybe in any language, to describe the depth of the experience and the intensity of the experience, and the power, the raw power of the whole process. It was such it was such an honor, I guess, is the best word. It was such an honor to create a portal for 2 epic little beings that I'm so excited to share life with. And some days are intense, but it's every day is worth it, because they're just the coolest little people that I've ever met. And to be able to acknowledge that my body and my being did have the capacity to manifest, to create, to facilitate, to follow through with the whole experience twice is, and even through the intense phase of doubt and fear, is really, I don't know, heartwarming, but it's deeper than that.
Yeah.
There's more, like it's incredible. It's epic.
Mm-hmm.
It's unimaginable, really. So
Yeah.
yeah, I'm excited to be where I am in this moment in time and to have had the opportunity to experience such an incredible journey with each of them, and to have had the opportunity to step into my power in ways that I never could have conceptualized in any other experience of life. I don't think this opportunity to step into one's power exists in any other realm.
It's very crystal clear in birth.
Yeah.
You know, like it's,
yeah.
there's, yeah. Yeah. How did the birth of the placenta go this time?
Yeah. It was similar. She was born at 1:36. Her placenta, or her cord didn't pulse quite as much, or quite as long. I think it was still almost 15 minutes, but, and then placenta was similar. I have to look at pictures to confirm, but it was also coming up on an hour. It was somewhere between 45 minutes and an hour. But I did have contractions this time, and like I had a couple mild contractions, and I pushed it out with no issue. So, but we didn't do the lotus birth this time because we were in the studio and there was a decent amount of blood on the floor, and I was like, it wasn't perfectly retrofitted. Anyway, there was ants starting to come in, and I was like, oh my God, get me out of here. So we just cut the cord, and we did a ceremony when we got inside. We did a proper ceremony, but and both times I had very strong intention to consume the placenta, and I kept it in my fridge. Both times, kept it in my fridge, and didn't consume it, and didn't consume it, and didn't consume it. And by the end of the first week or so, I said, okay, I'm going to release this to the ocean because I'm not going to consume it. So, yeah, both times actually, I had intention, and then just, I don't know, I couldn't stomach it. It was a combination of, I didn't feel like I could stomach it, but also, it felt daunting. The process felt daunting, and, I was overwhelmed at that point. So I was like, I'm just not going to.
How were you planning to consume it? What was the process going to be?
I was just going to chop it up in a smoothie and add berries and do it raw. That was the
right
intention.
Hardcore there.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Except I didn't follow through with it. But it was when I let Zephyrus go. No, that was when I let Shiloh's go. It was really beautiful because I dropped it in the ocean, and this little rock cod, I saw it grab the umbilical cord, and it pulled it a little ways, and then it got stuck on a rock, and then he got inside the placenta, like inside, and he just sat there like it was his new home. It was so cute. It was really heartwarming. Cool. Yeah.
Totally cute. Now I was going to bury the placenta. Now I want to take it to the ocean. I live right by the ocean.
Nice.
I can do that too.
Do it.
Yeah. I like that. Did you decide to register the birth of your babies?
No.
Did you go that way? Okay. I was gonna be like, how hard was that? You're like, not at all.
Not an issue. That said, we're dancing with it now because I am becoming more international, and I'm doing speaking engagements in different countries, and the kids want to come with me, and we don't have paperwork to take them across borders at this point. So So we're navigating it. We're also looking into diplomat passports from the UN. We're looking at a few different options. But
yeah, there's different ways other than registering your births. Like, I'm not familiar with enough to know them, but I know there are, right? Like, there's ways to be a non-citizen national and get a Canadian passport. So it's interesting.
Yeah. And yeah, so we're looking, like we've been investigating the sovereignty route as well. And but as far as we've seen with friends that are attempting that route, they're running into snags, and it's not a fully clear pathway either. Yeah. So yeah, so we've got feelers out in a few different directions. But at this point, the only people that know about them are their friends and their families and the people who are at the birth. But what we do know is that if we did want to register them by standard avenues, as long as there were people present or Canadian citizens present to witness the birth that would verify it, then that is mostly all we need. We have heard that they want prenatal records, but we don't have those. So then we need to give a letter, blah, blah, blah.
I don't know what they would do so much after the fact, like what other proof they would want. But you don't need those things to register. Like, you don't have to have, there's other ways, like there's other documentation you can provide. People don't have to feel like they have to go and get ultrasounds or something. Like, you can still register your baby. And a thing to keep in mind is they want you to register your baby. It's, advantageous to the government to have all the citizens registered. It's like monetarily advantageous. So when you feel like it's a favor happening to you to get a birth certificate, it's a favor to them as well. Like, so as much as like you might get the initial like bureaucratic front person who you're talking to on the phone giving you a hard time, ultimately the system wants you registered. So like, it's going to work out. They're going to register you if you want it.
And that's the thing is, like, do we want them to actually be a commodity on the stock market kind of thing, right? So that's what because we are also looking at how we get out of the system. So can we keep them out of the system and still navigate around the globe? That's what that's the question.
All the good questions.
Yeah.
Yes. Well, thank you so much for sharing your birth stories.
Absolutely. I apologize. They were a little bit it was a little, I'm a little tired. So.
I hear you. We might be tired forever. I feel like like postpartum is forever. Yeah. Yes. What kind of offerings do you have out in the world, and how can people contact you?
Oh, there's a plethora of offerings. I as I mentioned, my focus is trauma resolution, and I also work as a birth keeper and a death attendant as well. So I'm available for one-on-one therapy is my primary offering. I am also just about to publish a book with a collection of authors, and my chapter is from miscarriage to motherhood, actually. So it is specifically related to our discussion today. The book as a whole is called The Gifts of Pain, and it is a collection of individuals who have walked through painful or traumatic experiences and come to resolution and solution for themselves, and are wanting to offer their solutions to others. And so it's a beautiful work. They're all short stories, and after each story is an activity or an exercise page that gives people prompts to work through some of their own stuff based on these prompts. So that book will be launched on June 21st, and that'll be available. It'll be available on Amazon, or you can get a signed copy from me from my website. So the best way to get a hold of me is to go to my website, www.meca.life. So MECA.life, no .com. The domain is .life, and you can message me from there. You can also find me on Facebook, on LinkedIn, on Instagram. I'm mostly active on LinkedIn and working to become more active on the other platforms, but the most reliable avenue is contact me through my website.
Awesome. Okay, I'll put those details in the show notes so people can find you and your book. And
Beautiful.
Thanks so much for being here.
Yeah, thank you for the opportunity to share. It was a pleasure.
Thanks for listening. You can check out birth.throughtheveil for birth pictures from this episode. The show notes have ways you can connect with Erika and a link to her book, which is now available for purchase. You can submit your story. I would love to hear it. New episodes come out every other Tuesday. You can support us by following, subscribing, sharing, and rating and reviewing this podcast. Until next time.